because of the impact it may have on their profession. I think in this case it was a no-brainer. He had to go to police with what he had, turn over the tapes. At the same time, you know, they've been able to obviously do stories on it, and pretty powerful stories, and I think this looks good on not only him, but the entire journalism profession as a whole.
Absolutely. And if you're just tuning in, Mike Mcintyre from the Crime and Punishment radio show in Canada on Chorus and Rolco Radio is here with us. We're talking about the undercover sting operation Peter DeVries pulled on Jorn van der Sloot. Confessions. Confessions are interesting, Mike. You know from your line of work, and I know from this job that I do as a host and as my other job as a law enforcement officer. Confessions, as strange as it sounds, aren't always 100% accurate. No one comes out, although it's really rare, and every single word of his confession is the gospel truth. That's interesting, although it is sometimes confusing to those that listen and watch and read. Let's talk about confessions a little bit.
Well, I think it's important to look at the issue of whether anything was offered or promised to someone in exchange for a confession. And we've seen these cases, and this is an interesting parallel between Canada and the United States. Sting operations as a police tool are used quite regularly and quite effectively in Canada. They're outlawed in the U.S.
Right.
As you know, Dana, I've covered one particular one very intimately with my book, To the Grave Inside a Spectacular RCMP Sting, that I wrote back in 2006, which looked at a Mr. Big undercover sting operation in Canada involving a murder suspect that ultimately led to not only a confession, but the discovery of the victim's body, a trial, and a prosecution on the most serious charge in the criminal code. In that case, the police operation did become the source of challenge on behalf of the lawyer for the accused killer. They said that this was a case of entrapment, that they induced the accused to lie, to exaggerate. At the end of the day, the judge disagreed with that, allowed all the evidence in, and you got the conviction. There have been cases, though, in Canada with these sting operations where the very arguments that were being made in this case I speak of, that I wrote the book on, have been successful. I can think of a case years ago where the suspect in a murder was an alcoholic,
right,
and the police went and plied him with all kinds of liquor, got him drunk, and got a confession.
Yep.
They felt that was enough to lay a charge. They did. At trial, the judge threw the confession out. We've also seen cases where informants have been used, and as you mentioned earlier, disreputable people have been placed in jail cells, and sometimes they wear wires, sometimes they don't, and just come to police with information they glean. And their evidence has been very much challenged, and in some cases dismissed. I think it's important to look at whether or not you offer the accused anything in exchange for their testimony. Do you offer them money? Do you offer them booze? Do you offer them a break, a deal? And if that's the case, you have to look at it obviously with a much more cynical eye than you do if no such promises are made, if it's just coffee talk. And in the case of van der Sloot here, you know a little more than I do, Dana, about all the circumstances surrounding this recording, but I'm not aware that any promises were made to van der Sloot. Hey, tell me what happened, and I'll do some kind of a deal for you, or I'll make sure that this never gets heard. And without that kind of inducement, I think you have to look at a confession like this very seriously.
Well, this case is a case of someone gaining the trust of van der Sloot. Van der Sloot's no dummy. Van der Sloot was able to manipulate the system, and still is to this day, and thinks that he may have got away with the so-called perfect crime. You hate to use that analogy, but they were able to get this operative to gain his trust and then wire up the truck and go from there. But just before I let you go, Mike, the last question I want to ask you is about the media. Obviously, the media has covered this case, has surrounded it. It's spun 360 degrees every which way. It's had North American, worldwide coverage. All of a sudden now it comes to this, like the final straw. Finding NATALEE would be great evidence, corroborative evidence, if not just closure for the family to finally be able to bring her home. But do you see another story at another time coming up like this, or is this Holloway story a story in itself that we may never see again.
Well, you know, I think this is the perfect storm of stories.
Yeah.
It's got everything. It's got the attractive young American girl, the exotic locale, the setting for the crime, the mystery of, you know, where's her body, the cover-up, you know, so many questions. It's a perfect feeding frenzy for journalists of all kinds, including tabloid journalists. You know, we've all seen the cases, Dana, over the last few years. Since Holloway, there's been lots of other Americans, Canadians, that have been killed in foreign lands, often with all sorts of mystery and intrigue surrounding the circumstances, but nothing has generated the kind of publicity as Holloway. You know, maybe in a few years from now, once everybody's moved on from the Holloway case and whatever, you know, the Scott Peterson, or I guess the latest one is the other Peterson fellow in Chicago right now, the police officer and all his wives. I mean, there'll always be stories that will capture the public's imagination and the media's imagination. So, you know, I suspect we will see something along these lines again. It may be a while, but for now, this case has everything that you'd want, I guess, in a story that will dominate the 24-hour news cycle, that will churn out movies and books and that sort of thing. It's a great mystery. Well,
and hopefully this mystery, you know, is this finally the final nail in the coffin that will bring NATALEE home and put Mr. Vandersloot in jail for a long time? I guess we'll wait and see. Mike Mcintyre from the Crime and Punishment radio show. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dana. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. That's Mike Mcintyre from Crime and Punishment. And, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. There's a lot more to this story, a lot more to be told. This is the Scared Monkeys Radio Network. My name's Dana Pretzer. We'll be right